Today we are going to take up the issue of the methods that are adopted by psychologists to arrive at certain conclusions. All behavioral studies, at the end they would come forward with certain type of findings. Once you realize that there is a replication of finding, okay, people theorize it. So, hypothesis that you initially make, okay, once you realize that repeatedly the hypothesis gets proven, these hypotheses gets converted into theories. So, all the major concepts that you would get in the second week onward sessions, they have been examined using one or the other method that we are going to discuss today. So, what we would do today is one by one we would come across the important methods or the major methods that are used in psychology. And once we understand overall what are the methods, we would also go ahead with making comparison, what are the advantages and the limitations of each of these methods. So, the first method, that is the observation method. Now, observation, as you can understand, as the name suggests, that basically there is an observer, okay, who would be looking at either the individual or a phenomena. So, you can understand that there could be two broad categories of observation method. One where the observer participates in the process. So, observer is in direct contact with the group, he or she is observing. So, this is called as participant observation. Okay. Such type of observations are important when you engage in something like say play activity, say like group therapy. Okay. So, you become part of the group and then you observe it. So, this is called participant observation. The other type of observation is what is called as non-participant observation. Non-participant observation where the observer basically is not in direct contact with the group that he or she is trying to observe. Basically, you would find in clinical setup, okay, where there is always one way glass and one group is on the other side of the glass, whereas the observer is behind the glass. The group cannot see the observer, the psychologist, but the observer, the psychologist can see the group. Mostly you will always find in the clinical setup. Even in educational setup, sometime in the industrial setup, social, community and other settings also you can find the non-participant method being used. The other formats of observation method is what is called as naturalistic observation. So, again as the nomenclature suggests, this is the systematic study of animal or human behavior in natural setting. Okay. You cannot say bring an animal to the lab to understand the behavior of that very animal in their natural habitat. So, you cannot disturb the habitat. So, in that case the only option left is that you as an observer go to the naturalistic surrounding, okay, and then you make the observation. The second is the controlled observation, where the observer looks at the behavior under controlled lab condition. Okay. Bandura's Bobo doll example is the very famous example of controlled observation. There is another format of observation, what is called as subjective observation. In this method, the experimenter, okay, or the observer carefully examines and reports his or her own thoughts and feelings. Okay. So, you are the participant who is taking part in that experimentation process. You carefully re-look at your own thoughts and feelings and you report it. Now, the psychologist jots down the report, okay, and this is the subjective observation method. The other important method that you would usually find being used is the case study method, both in the area of organizational behavior, in the area of clinical psychology, you will find this very method being used. This is a method where intense description and analysis is done of a single individual or a set of individuals. So, one single case and you analyze it at length, you describe it, you interpret it. The other could be that you have a set of people, okay, the activity, and then you make an intense description and analysis of it. That is called case study. Again, survey, you all know, it is a very popular method. It is basically a kind of extensive and widespread study which is designed to yield specific information. say if you have questionnaires with you, okay, a set of items which intends to seek very specific information regarding a particular aspect of the behavior, or when you conduct interviews, okay, from a selected group of people to gather information, okay, and then what you do, you analyze it and you come forward with certain type of findings that see overall this is how people respond, overall this is what people think, overall this is what is the interpretation of people of this very given situation. These are the survey reports. One very popular type of research that you find in psychology is the correlational type of research. This type of a technique is basically based on the natural occurrence of relationship between two or more variables. So, any two things, okay, which are interrelated in a natural order. Okay. Now, what happens, there are few things which you can very easily identify that there is a natural connection between the two. Say for instance, if you have the thunder sound and the lightning effect during rainy season, you very easily correlate that if X has taken place, Y is bound to happen. Okay. So, you see the light first and then after some time, okay, you hear the sound, okay, and you understand that these two things are correlated, they are outcome of the same process, because light travels faster, therefore, you see lightning first and the sound you receive little later. Now, this is a natural occurring relationship. In psychology, one of the major problem is that there are certain inherent relationships that you have to decipher, because it is not so apparent. So, what happens, the psychologists, they use correlational research, they use this very technique to find out relationship between two or more than two things. Okay. So, you have quantified constructs, say for example, the simplest example could be that if you are extremely intelligent, okay, your scholastic score should match with it. No? So, if you are a person who is very intelligent, your marks in certain subjects would be very high, if not all subjects. Okay. So, there is a correlation. So, if this is high, if X is high, Y is also going to be high. This type of a relationship is called as positive correlation, that if there is an increase in one variable, the other variable is also going to increase. The reverse could be there. Say like students who are very studious, they do not go to a sports field, if this is the observation. You say that if one thing increases, the other thing decreases. So, if your engagement in scholastic activities increases, your activity in the sports field diminishes. So, increase in one variable is associated with decrease in the other variable. This is called negative correlation. And the third possibility is that the two constructs that you are trying to study, they are not at all related to each other. Okay. Say for instance, if I am residing in a hostel, in my hall of residence, my hostel, if there are 7 dogs in the premise and they bark in the evening hours, and I realize that it is the evening hours when I can sit and concentrate on my studies. Now, concentration on the books, the text that I am referring to, and the barking of the dog, they might take place at the same time, okay, but it has no correlation. Okay. So, ideally what should happen, that things which are dissociated, things which do not have an association, okay, when you compute the correlation, the statistical technique to compute this relationship, you realize that these two things should be disconnected. There should be a zero correlation between the two. Experimentation, of course, is the most popular method. Now, what happens in experimental research? There are certain conditions that are arranged and controlled, okay, just for a purposeful manipulation of one variable to draw inference, so that you can draw a larger picture. So, what happens, people take one group, what they call as experimental group, and they take the second group, what they call as the control group. Usually in experimental research, what happens, this very group, the first group, the experimental group, is exposed to changes in the variables, okay, and these variables little later we will come to it, they are called independent variables. Okay. So, say for example, if I am trying to study the effect of intelligence, okay, on the time taken on certain task and the accuracy of response on that specific task. Now, what will happen? These two things, the time taken and the accuracy, they become the dependent variable and my intelligence is the independent variable. Okay. So, effect of this variable on that variable, okay, this is what is done in the case of experimental research. And when you have two groups, one group which is exposed to changes in the independent variable is called the experimental group. The other group where the independent variable does not undergo any change, okay, is called the control group. And what you see is basically the difference in the performance of the first and the second group, the experimental and the control group. So, this is now what is done in experimental research. Now, in lab experiments what happen? You have a controlled environment, okay, but there could be cases where you still have a better control over the environment, but it need not be a lab setup actually. Okay. But experimental method basically it gives you accurate and objective measurement, and the second that the researcher has a big control over place, time, circumstances and participants, as well as the process of this experiment are usually very standardized. Okay. So, experimental method of course has a very what I should say, experimental method is basically one of the very robust methods of deriving findings out of your research. Now, there could be field experiments as well. Okay. So, field experiment would be those type of experiments which are conducted in natural environment of the participants, okay, where situations are artificially created. So, the circumstances that the individual experiences, they are artificially induced there, but the participant is not removed from the natural habitat, is not brought to the lab setup. Now, here also the experimenter basically manipulates the independent variable, but this manipulation is done in the real life setup. Okay. And the experimenter does not have actually the real control over certain extraneous variables. So, these are the variables which you do not have control over. You can think of the independent variables, you can plan your dependent variables. You assume that there would be a relationship between the independent and the dependent variable, but then there could be some other types of variables what are called as extraneous variables which you do not have control over. Now, independent variables basically are the conditions that are varied in the experiments. Dependent variables are basically the changes that takes place as a consequence of changes in the independent variable, and then we have the intervening variables, the extraneous variables. So, these are those variables which affects the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. Okay. And if you can predict them, of course, there are methods of controlling them. Okay. And there is also a chance that there could be certain variables which you did not predict, but then it does affect the relationship. Usually you will find that people compute correlation. So, direct correlation between the independent and the dependent variable. Independent variable on the screen you will find written IV, and the dependent variable which you find written dV. Okay. You would also find some variables which basically somewhere highly influences the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. One form of relationship is what is called as mediation effect. So, mediation means what you find written here as MV, the independent variable, okay, influences the dependent variable and it goes through the mediating variable. Okay. The other type of effect is what is called as the moderation effect, where the independent variable affects the dependent variable, but then there are certain other factors as well which affects this the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. So, this is called the moderation effect. Because this is a introductory psychology course, I will not go into the details of the mediation and the moderation effect. Okay. But broadly for understanding, we have the independent, the dependent and the extraneous variables. Okay. You can also, for your purpose of analysis, you can consider one set of variable as either mediating variable or as moderating variable. So, variables are basically those concepts which are quantified. Okay. Different values are assigned to them, and in terms of the numbers that you assign, variables are also understood as continuous or discrete variables. So, those variables which can basically assume any numerical value within a specific range, okay, they are called as continuous variables. Say for example, if you look at a scale, okay, you find that there are 2 points, say 0, 1, 2, 3, but between 0 and 1 also you will find 10 different lines on the scales. So, there is a continuity and there is an equal gap between the lines there. In real life terms, say for example, age is a continuous variable. There are few variables which are discrete. Discrete means those variables for which the individual value falls on the scale, okay, only with certain gap, and the gap is very distinct. Say for example, if you are collecting demographic details and you ask someone how many family members do you have, or if you ask somebody how many children do you have, okay, the number would vary, and this would be basically a discrete variable. Okay. Now, coming back to the methods that we have discussed, if we try to look at the advantages and the limitations of these methods, correlation method has a beauty. It clarifies the relationship between the variables which usually cannot be examined using other methods. Okay. So, it allows you to predict behavior. The limitation of correlational research of course is the fact that it does not permit you to draw the conclusion regarding the cause and effect relationship, whether this did lead to that or not, that you cannot predict. All you can say is that there is a relationship between the two. Experimental method on the other hand, the greatest advantage is that it has strict control of variables, okay, and you can draw conclusion about the cause and effect relationship, something that was missing in correlation research, okay, that you can do in experimental research. The major limitation of experimental research of course is the artificiality of the setting, and if you make changes in the setting, it might influence behavior. Second, an important thing is that the unexpected and uncontrolled variables sometimes do confound the result, okay, and parsing out the effect of the confounding variable is again a major challenge in experimental research. Naturalistic observation we discussed, it has a big advantage, it provides you a great deal of first hand behavior information, okay, and it is likely to be more accurate, but the problem is that the presence of observer sometime may affect the behavior. Secondly, the observer's pre-existing bias, it might also influence the inference that one is drawing, and it is often unclear whether observation can be generalized to other settings and to other participants, the other subjects. That is again a big limitation of the naturalistic observation. Surveys, again it has big advantage, okay. You look at the behavior in a more natural, spontaneous and varied fashion. The biggest advantage is that it enables the large amount of data to be gathered, okay, and by and large it is least expensive of all the methods usually, okay, but then you have a voluminous data and you can draw inference out of it. The problem of course with the survey technique is that sampling bias sometimes can skew the result. So, if you have not drawn your sample which is a representative of the population, then your findings might be very biased. Second, because you are using certain questions, therefore, if you construct poor questions, it might result into ambiguous type of answers, and therefore, accuracy depends upon the ability and willingness of the participant both, as well as how good is the construction of the items that you are using in your survey. Case studies of course, they have advantage, they yield great deal of detailed descriptive information. You can go for in-depth investigation of the individual, of the group, of the event or of the community. You also have rich qualitative data, okay, which has very high ecological validity. So, case study has all those advantages. The limitation is that you may not actually come across representative sample, because you have come across one individual or a small set of individuals. So, because you do not have representative sample, so usually generalization is a big problem. It is also very time consuming, sometimes very expensive, and once again the bias of the observer might influence the findings of case studies. In terms of the tools that psychologists use, interview, which could be an unstructured format, it could be in a structured format. So, in the unstructured format of the interviews, you go ahead with informal interviews where you have no fixed questions. You have the opportunity to raise topics and issues that you consider to be relevant, okay, and you can ask them in one way, and this would lead to a very rich qualitative data for interpretation. You have the option of a structured interview where you conduct it in a formal setup, where you set your questions beforehand. So, you have a predetermined set of questions, okay, and the questions that you ask to every participant is common. So, you do not change the question. The interviewer of course maintains their role and social distance from the interviewee, okay, and then you go ahead with this very interview. All these tools are popular, and you will find them being used. Questionnaires very popularly used. It can be either face to face, it could be done telephonically, it could be sent by post. Questions usually can be open ended, or it could be very tightly structured type of questions. You could have choice of answers from given alternatives, or you have the choice of question which is important because you want to get rid of biases, ambiguity, and you do not want to commit offense to the respondent, to the participant. So, questionnaire again is a very popular tool, and besides this you find whole lot of apparatus being used in psychology. Okay. Nowadays computer assisted tests are there. There are old models, memory drum, touch stethoscope, Muller-Lyer apparatus. Traditional department laboratories would have whole range of apparatus there. Many apparatus now you would find which are more computer centric now. Okay, so there are specialized softwares where you can write your own program, you can design your own experiment. Okay, so this is overall the tools, the techniques that are used by psychologists, okay, to understand one or the other human phenomena. The psychological underpinning can very easily be understood out of it. Okay. All of these methods, okay, are extensively used, all of them, and as we discussed towards the end, they have their advantages, they have their limitations, and therefore, when you read the literature you would realize that some study they use one method, some study they use the other method, but remember one thing, that irrespective of the method that you use, irrespective of the technique that you use, basically you are attempting to understand the interplay of various factors, what are called as variables here, okay, and therefore you analyze the process, the mental process, the behavioral process, the psychological process. So, this is all about the methods in psychology.